Want to drink. Chapter 35, Review of the Fifth Period. Introduction of the four Gospels and Acts of the Apostles preparatory to the establishment of the papacy. The subject involved in mystery, sources of information gone, slaughter of the innocents. Though we find no mention of the four Gospels during the fifth period, with the single exception of the Gospel of John, there is reason to believe they were all written during this time as a part of the structure upon which Roman Catholic dominion was to rest. This relation to Roman Catholicism is more particularly to be noticed in the Gospels of John and Matthew and the Acts of the Apostles. The Gospels of Luke and Mark may have been composed without any special reference to the hierarchy, the one to counteract the influence of Marcion and his Gospel, and the other to preserve in a complete and comprehensive form some of the older traditions of the Church, which have been in circulation in various forms, particularly in the Gospel of Peter. The Gospel of John was adopted as settling in beautiful language and in an acceptable form the doctrine of the divinity of Jesus and as indicating the unity of the church under Peter. The Gospel of Matthew, in still more explicit language, laid the foundations broad and deep for the establishment of the supremacy of the papal power on the authority of Christ as delegated to Peter. While the Acts of the Apostles bridged over the differences which had so long existed between the followers of Peter and Paul. While thus much is apparent upon the surface, if we attempt to go deeper into the subject, we find everything involved in mystery. All the most reliable sources of information are closed to the researches of the historian, those writings of the 2nd century to which he would naturally turn for information. Commentaries and works written especially concerning the Gospels then in circulation are lost or destroyed without a single exception. Not one remains to give its testimony on one side or the other of any controverted question. Also, many books written on the same subject during the next 200 or 300 years, while it is notorious that others which have been preserved have been tampered with and extensively interpolated. Loss or destruction of evidence concerning the four Gospels. The following is some of the evidence of the 2nd century which has disappeared. 1. The commentaries of Basilides, A.D. 125. Basilides is said to have written a commentary on the Gospel in 24 books. A Gospel is also attributed to him, but the better opinion appears to be that the commentaries and the Gospel were one and the same. These commentaries must have thrown a flood of light upon the history of the Gospels then in existence. They would at least disclose the number and character of the principal ones then in circulation. 2. Agrippa Castor, A.D. 130, wrote in refutation of the heresies of Basilides. This has perished with the commentaries of his adversary. 3. The works of Prodicus, A.D. 120. The followers of Prodicus boasted of having the secret books of Zoroaster. His writings would probably have disclosed the connection between Persian mythology and the Gospels of the infancy. 4. Apologies of Quadratus and Aristides, A.D. 126. If these had been preserved, we could test the correctness of the assertion of Eusebius that the Apology of Quadratus referred to the miracles of Christ, which in that case would be, so far as known, the first reference to them in history. We would know also what is meant by the statement of the same historian, if there be any truth in it at all, that Quadratus and others at that time delivered to those who had not heard the faith the books of the Holy Gospels. We would probably learn from their writings what Gospels were extant in their day. 5. Ariston, A.D. 130. According to Papias, as coming through Eusebius, preserved traditions concerning Christ. These traditions would have thrown much light upon the gospel history and upon the earlier gospels. 6. John the Presbyter, A.D. 130. John, like Ariston, appears in Eusebius as one of the informants of Papias, particularly concerning certain writings composed by Mark and Matthew, information which was long supposed to relate to the Gospels bearing those names. It is now thought they cannot be regarded as referring to any of the canonical Gospels. Had we the original traditions or statements in full, they would at once settle the question. 7. Cerinthus, AD 145, was the reputed author of a gospel. His gospel and writings are lost or destroyed. 8. Valentinus, AD 150. Valentinus had a gospel called the Gospel of Truth. Irenaeus places it sharply in antagonism with the four Gospels, says they are false if that of Valentinus was the Gospel of Truth, that if they are true, Valentinus was false. As the work of Irenaeus is preserved and the four Gospels, it is much to be regretted and must be considered calamitous to the cause of impartial investigation that we have not the Gospel of Valentinus and his writings to support it. 9. Papias. How do you say that? Papias? Papias. It's not it either. Whatever. I can't say it though. Papias. Papias. AD 125. Is said to have written 5 books entitled Exposition of the Oracles of the Lord. This must have been a commentary on the oracles or collections of the sayings of Christ and would have been invaluable, giving those sayings as they stood early in the 2nd century. 10. The writings of Marcion. Pure Christianity has suffered no greater loss than that of the writings of Marcion, the great theological thinker of the 2nd century, the compiler of the first complete gospel, the collector of the epistles of Paul, the editor and publisher of the first New Testament. While the elaborate work against him, written by Tertullian, who called him a hound, has been preserved, and the work of Epiphanius, who bestowed upon him the euphonious appellation of beast, the writings of Marcion have perished, except such as are found in the references and citations of his adversaries. His works have shared the common fate of the writings of the heretics of the 2nd century, none of which in their original form have been permitted to come down to us. Marcion was an educated man and a profound thinker, and no relic of Christian antiquity next to the epistles of Paul would today be more valuable than his writings. Being himself a collector of Gospel and New Testament manuscripts, his writings upon those subjects would forever set at rest the question as to what Gospels were in circulation. 11. The work of Justin Martyr against heresies. As his dialogue with Trypho contains an exposition of the Old Testament, his work against heresies would probably have thrown light upon the Gospels in circulation in his day. It would at least have determined the much controverted question as to the Gospels used by Justin himself. 12. The writings of Apelles, AD 160. Apelles was a Gnostic leader who had a gospel of his own and whose writings must have referred to other gospels. His works are lost or destroyed. 13. Peregrinus, AD about 160. An erratic but talented Christian philosopher, held for a time a commanding position among the Christians of Palestine. Some books, says Lucian, he interpreted and explained, others he wrote. His writings would constitute an important chapter in the history of the times. We have sketches of the man from Lucian, Ammianus, Aulus Gellius, and others, but his writings have all perished. 14. Marcellina, AD 160. It would scarcely be expected that the heretical writings of a woman would be preserved amid such wholesale slaughter of the obnoxious works of the opposite sex. The writings of Marcellina have perished. 15. Montanus, AD 170. Much has been said about Montanism, but we have only such extracts from the works of its founder as his adversaries have chosen to preserve. 16. The writings of Tatian, AD 170. Tatian wrote, it is said, a harmony of the Gospels. Though it is quite evident that he made use of the Gospel of the Hebrews and his work was even known by some under that name, an attempt has been made to connect his harmony with the four Gospels on the unsupported and suspicious testimony of Eusebius. He says it was called the Diatessaron, which he explains as meaning of or from the four. If we had the writings of Tatian himself or his harmony, the question could speedily be determined. 17. Marcus, about AD 170, had, according to Irenaeus, an innumerable multitude of apocryphal writings. He probably wrote in explanation of these books and of their origin, both the books themselves with a few exceptions and whatever he may have written concerning them have perished.